Present continuous. Affirmative statements, negative statements, yes/no questions, and information questions.
The present continuous tense, sometimes called present progressive tense, is used with action verbs such as work, write, talk, and eat. It is not used with so-called stative verbs. On the chart on this slide, I have listed stative verbs. There are four classifications of stative verbs: verbs of emotion, verbs of cognition, verbs of possession, and verbs of sense. Now, sometimes some of the verbs listed here may not seem to be stative verbs, and in fact, in another language, some of these verbs, for example, some of the verbs of cognition, may be considered action verbs. But in English, if you use this chart, it will help you have a sense of the state of verbs in English. It's important to note that the verb be, when used as the main verb, is also a stative verb. I haven't listed it here. Now, some of the verbs listed here have meanings other than stative meanings. So some of these verbs may be used in the present continuous, but when done so, the idea is different, the meaning is different. For example, the verb have, when here, means to possess, to have something. But we use the verb have in some idiomatic phrases such as we're having a party. There, have doesn't mean to possess. So if the verb have does not have the idea of possession, then it can be used in the present continuous. Also, the verbs of sense can sometimes be used as verbs of action. For example, when used as a verb of sense, taste, in the sentence, the soup tastes salty, there, taste means the sense of taste. But in the sentence, my friend is tasting the soup, there, taste is being used as an action. And so, if it implies an action, it can be used in the present continuous. So with the verbs of sense in particular, if the sense is being referred to, then they are not used in the present continuous. But if an action is implied, indicated, then they are sometimes used in the present continuous. The time references of the present continuous are varied. It can refer to the moment of speaking or writing. It can refer to a temporary general present, or it can sometimes be used to refer to a future time. Now, I list the temporary general present separate from the moment of speaking, but it's clear that the moment of speaking or writing is also, in a sense, temporary. So moment of speaking, writing also has a sense of temporary. But I separate it from the temporary general present because what I call the temporary general present encompasses a longer time period. In the example sentence I have on the slide, Orlando is taking 3 courses this term. The time period is this term, which is a period of several months. So they are similar, the moment of speaking and writing and the temporary general present, but I separate them because the temporary general present usually encompasses a longer period of time. This sense of temporary is important because the uses of the present continuous contrast with the use of the simple present tense. For most verbs, the simple present tense implies a permanent situation or a habit or routine that began in the past and will probably continue into the future. By contrast, the present continuous indicates nothing about the past. In the example sentence, Philip is washing the dishes, we don't know if Philip ever washed dishes before in the past. This might be the first time that he is washing dishes. And Philip is washing the dishes does not imply that the situation will continue in the future. We don't know if Philip will ever wash dishes again in the future. So one of the primary uses of the present continuous is to refer to something in the present with a sense that it is temporary and with no indication if it happened prior, before, in the past, and with no indication if it will happen again in the future. The third time reference listed on this slide, future time, to use the present continuous to express future time, some future time reference is necessary in the context. There has to be some reference to a future time in the context. Now, it may be in the same sentence, as in the example sentence here, I am working overtime tomorrow night. Tomorrow is what is indicating that this is future. In some situations, the future time reference may be in a preceding sentence or a preceding question. For example, if someone asks the question, "What are you doing tomorrow night?" An appropriate answer is, "I'm working." We understand that the time is future because in the question, the person said tomorrow night. So even though in the answer, "I am working," it doesn't say tomorrow night, we understand it's referring to a future time because that future time reference was in the question. Without a reference to a future time such as tomorrow night, next week, next Saturday, the time reference will be understood to mean at the moment of speaking, or if you are writing, at the moment that you are writing that sentence. The present continuous is formed by adding some form of the verb be in the present, that is, am or is or are, plus the main verb in the ing form, technically the present participle form. So you need two words for the present continuous verb. You need am or is or are plus the main verb with the suffix ing. To form the negative in the present continuous, we put the word not after the auxiliary am, is, or are. This is the typical way to form negative in English. In English, it is typical to put the word not after the auxiliary, the first auxiliary if there is more than one. So if you look at the example sentences, Philip is not washing the dishes. Emma and Enid are not cooking dinner. The students are not taking a math test, etc. It should be remembered that sometimes am, is, and are contract with the preceding noun or pronoun. So for example, I am not working sometimes will be I'm not working. So sometimes we say I am, sometimes we say I'm. Um, Philip is not washing dishes. Philip's not washing dishes. The contraction of Philip plus is Philip's not washing dishes. So sometimes the subject and the auxiliary am, is, are contracted. Another possibility, sometimes the auxiliary is and are, those two forms, contract with not. So is not produces isn't, are not produces aren't. There is no contraction for am not. So we only have is not and are not. To form yes-no questions in the present continuous, that is, questions that we normally answer with yes or no, we put the auxiliary am, is, are before the subject. So am, is, are goes before the subject. The main verb in the ing form comes after the subject. The examples here: is Carla's uncle fixing her computer? We get is, then Carla's uncle. Are you taking a math class this term? We get are, then you, and then taking. Are his cousins coming to his graduation party? We get are, then the subject his cousins, and then coming, the main verb in the ing form. So notice that the order is am, is, are, subject, and main verb. I don't have an example with I because it's not very common that we ask ourselves questions. So that's why I don't have an example. This pattern of auxiliary, subject, and the main verb and the rest of the sentence is the typical pattern for yes-no questions in English.
Present continuous. Yes, no question word order versus statement word order. In yes, no questions, we get am or is or are. Then we get the subject, then the main verb with the ing suffix, and then the rest of the question. So for example, is John eating his lunch right now? In the statement, we get the subject, then am or is or are, the main verb with the ing suffix, and the rest of the statement. John is eating his lunch right now. So the question begins with am or is or are, and then the subject is John. The statement, we get the subject, and then we get am or is or are, and main verb with ing, and the rest of the statement. So the order of words in English is one of the primary ways we distinguish questions from statements that are not questions. In the second example, we have, are his cousins coming to his graduation party? So again, because it's a question, we get are, then the subject, his cousins, then the main verb with the ing suffix, and then the rest of the question. In the statement, we begin with the subject, his cousins, then we get are coming to his graduation party. So again, the order of words is the main way we distinguish questions from statements that are not questions. You'll notice that with yes, no questions in speaking, at the end, our voice goes up. So, is John eating lunch right now? Right? The voice goes up. Are his cousins coming to his graduation party? The voice goes up. So when speaking, at the end of yes no questions, the voice goes up, the tone goes up. In statements, the voice does not go up. John is eating his lunch right now. His cousins are coming to his graduation party. So in speech, not only do we use word order, but we use rising intonation at the end of yes no questions to indicate that they are questions. Short answers to yes no questions. When someone asks a yes no question, the person anticipates an affirmative or negative answer. Of course, it's possible that the answer is not affirmative or negative. You might say, I don't know. But the person is indicating that they anticipate an affirmative or negative answer. Okay? If you answer in the affirmative, you can say yes, but there are other ways to indicate affirmative, like we say yeah, uh-huh, okay, sure. In the negative, you can say no, but we also say nope, nah, uh-uh. So that's why I say some way to indicate affirmative or negative. Now you can answer with just yes or no, but that's a super short answer. And sometimes if you answer with only one word, it will give the person who asked the question the idea that you don't want to talk to them. So a short answer, we add a little bit more. We indicate affirmative yes. Then we usually use a pronoun to substitute for a noun phrase in the question. For example, is Carla's uncle fixing her computer? Carla's uncle is the noun phrase. Because uncle is masculine, we would say he. And then we use the appropriate form of the verb am or is or are. So with he, we get is. In the negative, we get no. Then again, he is, but now we need not to indicate that it's negative. So no, he is not, or no, he isn't. Now there are other ways that you can answer. You can say yes, Carla's uncle is fixing her computer, or no, Carla's uncle is not fixing her computer. So there are different ways to answer. Super short, short, which I'm showing here, or you can make it even longer by repeating much of the question. In the second example, we have, are you taking a math class this term? So then affirmative, yes, and because the person's asking you, you answer I, and then the appropriate form is am. Yes, I am. Or no, I am not, or no, I'm not. The next example, are his cousins coming to his graduation party? Yes, they, because cousins is plural, his cousins. Yes, they are, or no, they are not. Is John eating his lunch right now? Yes, he is. No, he is not. So these are examples of typical short answers to yes no questions when the verb is in present continuous.
To form information questions in the present continuous, we begin with an information word or sometimes words. Then we get the auxiliary am, is, or are, followed by the subject, the main verb in the ing form, and then the rest of the sentence if there is more material in the sentence, in the question. Right? So if you look at the examples here, WH word, what? Then the auxiliary is, the subject, your friend, the main verb, writing, with the ing form, and then the rest of the sentence on the envelope. Why, the WH word, are, the auxiliary, you, the subject, and then crying, the main verb in the ing form. The last example on this slide is the exception to the normal rule. In the last example, we get the WH word who, the auxiliary is, followed by the main verb in the ing form. The reason that the last example is an exception is because in that question there is no subject. And so we cannot put the subject between the auxiliary is and the main verb fixing because we don't have one. In fact, the answer to that question is the subject. That is, the word who is asking what the subject is. And so, since we don't have a subject to put in the subject position in that question, we have the auxiliary verb is, followed immediately by the main verb in the ing form, fixing. Who is fixing your car? Questions about subjects are always the exception to the normal word order in information questions. This pattern of WH word, auxiliary, subject, and then the rest of the verb and the rest of the sentence is the normal word order in English. If you remember from present tense, instead of am or is or are, we had do or does, and then the verb in the basic form. So in the present tense, we got WH word, do or does, subject, and then the verb in the basic form. So this pattern of WH word, auxiliary, subject, rest of verb, rest of sentence is the typical pattern for information questions, WH questions in English.
Information question word order versus statement word order. With information questions, they are similar to yes-no questions. But with information questions, we need a WH word, a question word, or sometimes it's more than one word. So it's not always just one word. It can be more than one word. So we need the question word or words. Then we get am or is or are. Then the subject and the main verb in ing and the rest of the question if there's more. In the statement, we don't have the question word because in the statement, we're going to answer the question. So we begin with the subject, the boys, and then we get are going. So notice in the question we get are the boys, but then in the statement we get the boys are. And then we need the answer to the question where, to the park. So where are the boys going? The boys are going to the park. So again, the order of words in questions is usually different than the order of words in the answer to the question in statements. All right. So similar to yes/no questions, in the question we get am or is or are, then the subject. In the statement, we get the subject and then am or is or are, and then the main verb with ing. In the second example, we get what is your friend writing on the envelope? So again, we get a question word in this what, then we get is, the subject your friend, and then writing. In the statement, we get the subject my friend is writing. So again, the order of the words in the question is different than the order of the words in the answer, in the statement. And of course, in the answer, not only is the order of the words different, but then we get the missing information. So what is your friend writing on the envelope? My friend is writing an address. In speaking, information questions are different than yes no questions because in information questions, at the end of the question, our voice does not go up. So, where are the boys going? What is your friend writing on the envelope? The voice does not go up. In yes no questions, our voice goes up at the end of the question. The order of words in an information question that has no subject is the same as the order of the words in the statement. So if you look at the example here, who is fixing your car? There's no subject. Who, in fact, is asking for the subject. So there is no subject. So if there's no subject, then we cannot put the subject before am or is or are because there is no subject. And then a possible answer is Nelson is fixing my car. So notice Nelson is in the subject position in the statement. It does not contrast with the question because in the question there is no subject. So when you ask a question and the answer is the subject, it can be a person, it can be a thing. If the answer is the subject, that is, if the question does not have a subject, then the order of words in the question will be the same as the order of words in the statement.